more than a feeling. When I hear that old song they used to play, I begin dreaming. When I hear Marianne walked away. I don't want to risk the high note because my throat is like destroyed by a cold I've been fighting. Anyway, welcome back to StillerBros at the Movies, where today we revisit an old story that has been 9 years in the making, Inside Out 2. So the first Inside Out is probably Pete Docter's magnum opus, at least in our opinion. It's one of those movies that's almost effortless in its brilliance.
Yeah.
Like, it almost feels like it all spilled out of their heads, and then they eventually just made an almost perfect animated movie.
Like, it feels like it was nothing, like no work went into it in the best way possible. But then you look at the behind the scenes stories and find out there was so much work into this.
And it's just an amazing movie, and it's still one of my favorite Pixar movies to this day. We rewatched it last night to prep for this movie, and it still holds up.
It is probably my favorite animated movie of all time at this point.
And it's the only Pete Docter movie that he directed, at least, to not just leave the door open for a sequel, but to basically hold that door open.
I mean, this, of all of Pixar's movies ever, this was the one that that felt like it needed a sequel, just because there was so much they could have done with it.
It's a world that you can play a lot with, and it's kind of shocking that it took 9 years, but it's also one of those things where they always said for the last 9 years, this is a movie we don't want to rush a sequel for. We want to make sure that when we finally make it, it will be an actually worthy story. And hopefully they did that.
So a year and a half ago when they announced this movie at D23, we got kind of excited, but also, obviously, a little skeptical, because it's a sequel to one of the best movies ever made.
But it's also a sequel in which the original director is not at the helm anymore.
Obviously, Pete Docter, probably a little busy because he is now being Chief Creative Officer at Pixar now with his role that he gained. But this time around, we have a Pixar storyboard artist, Kelsey Mann, taking on the role.
And obviously, the guy has some credentials. Pixar doesn't usually give movies to people who haven't at least directed a short film or two for the company, to make sure that they actually can handle the logistics of making a movie.
I mean, the last time they did that without anybody without credentials was Pete Docter, but still.
Either way, 9 years later, we've got Inside Out 2. We've got the return of so many of the important people involved in it. Amy Poehler, Phyllis Smith, Lewis Black,
Kyle MacLachlan, Diane Lane.
Of course, there's a big casting change of the fact that Mindy Kaling and Bill Hader, the goofus and gallant of self-titled supposed dark comedies that are currently sitting on Max right now.
Yes.
Both of them decided to leave because,
according to reports, there was some monetary issues with them returning.
Apparently they weren't getting paid near as much as Amy Poehler, which, when you look at the trailer and see how expanded their roles are, you kind of understand where they're coming from. But because they did not come back, they had to fill their roles. So playing the new Disgust is Liza Lapira, and playing the new Fear is Tony Hale from Veep and Toy Story 4.
But also we have new cast members joining the fray.
Yes, so obviously one of the big things they were going to be doing with Inside Out 2 was going to be expanding the roles of other emotions, and so, hey, look, anxiety is here, played by Maya Hawke, and also embarrassment, played by Paul Walter Hauser,
and envy, played by Iowa Debris, and then nostalgia, played by the legend June Squibb.
And apparently Frank Oz is back in here somewhere.
Frank Oz and Dave Goelz, so, extra Muppety goodness, a little bit of Muppety goodness thrown in there for good measure.
I mean, you look at the design of Anxiety, and you can already tell there's Muppety influences in there.
Yeah.
That is the most Muppety thing to come out of Pixar in decades. New director, new group of emotions. Pixar is kind of still on a kind of plateau of we're gonna crank out solid stuff, and we'll see where it goes.
However, there has been a lot of iffiness going on behind the scenes, especially with some comments made about where they're going with their future movies, but also some behind the scenes stuff with the fact that there have been some layoffs lately. But I support TAG in about a month because they might be going on strike.
Yeah, we're gonna just basically stand by the Animation Guild the same way we stood by the actors and the Writers Guilds last year, because we should probably make sure that we cover all our bases in making sure that the people who make the movies we love don't get screwed over.
Hashtag Union Strong.
Anyway, all these years later, a movie about what comes next in the character of Riley's life is just kind of what we've been waiting for.
Obviously, now we're moving it. We're into the first movie. We had a 12-year-old girl, and emotions can run high for 12-year-olds. But now she's 13. So, and when is probably the peak emotional for any human being, especially for girls,
especially for people who are assigned female at birth. That can be a very emotional time in your life. Puberty.
For a myriad of reasons, but again, for those assigned female at birth, it is probably, there is one particular aspect of physical and mental health that can really drive you nuts.
This is a movie that's gonna be interesting. Well, okay, so some people have already sided against this movie here and there on the internet because they're just like, oh, so anxiety is just gonna bottle up all the emotions? I guess 13-year-olds don't feel joy, happiness, fear, disgust, or anger. And I'm one of those people who's just like, guys, do you not know what a character arc is?
Also, were you not 13?
Anxiety? Have you never felt anxiety or an anxiety attack at the very least?
One of the most anxious points in someone's life is when you're going through puberty and you're all lanky and gross and hairy and everything in your body is changing.
And anxiety is just one of those things where if you feel it enough, it shuts down pretty much everything. You have a real anxiety attack and you're gonna feel nothing but anxious.
So, obviously there's a lot to this, and the first movie is still very much praised for its work in the psychological community.
Like, it's literally one of the best meditations on forced happiness that's ever been put to film. Basically built on the idea that if you allow yourself to feel the full spectrum of emotions and not just force yourself to be happy all the time, you'll be a fuller and more well-rounded person.
And this movie is probably going to be no different, especially from the fact that we have Meg LaFave, who wrote the first movie, back to write this movie.
And I really have high hopes for this. Like we've been saying, this was 9 years in the making. The fact that it took 9 years for them to finally decide, okay, maybe this is the story to make the sequel out of, is just all we can hope for.
And because let's be honest, they could have cranked out like a dozen of these by now, just if they were really phoning it in.
Yeah, Pixar was really as phoning it in as most people say by the fact that Toy Story 5 is currently on the table. We probably would have had Riley in her 30s by now.
Also, let's get ready to see how the world reacts to this movie about a girl going through puberty. Only this time, not a Chinese girl, a Chinese-Canadian girl in 2002.
She's also not turning into a panda. It's also not basically Teen Wolf, but panda.
Yeah.
We still like Turning Red, for the record. Don't kill us.
Yes.
But, yeah, for right now, I don't know what else to say, but we'll see you guys after the chat. Alright, so we are out, and I thought it was pretty good, but I definitely think that the first one was better. Maybe it's just if I'm measuring it by the cry test, where it's like the first movie still to this day makes me cry. The second movie didn't quite get me there.
Yeah, it was less of an emotional gut punch this time around. It felt like a lot of it hitting the same beats as the last one, as the first movie, so...
Yeah, it felt like there was this moment where where we were just like, the all is lost moment needs to be exactly like this. The moment where we get everything back to normal needs to be like this. The moment of self-growth needs to be like this. It just kind of felt like, I'm not gonna say it was hollow or anything like that. There's definitely emotional beats. It's definitely one of those things where the movie is, there's definitely the fact that when Pixar is on, it's really on, and I feel like this is one where it was on.
Well, let's get a little farther into it.
Yeah, so obviously Amy Poehler, Lewis Black, Phyllis Smith, everyone from the first movie is perfectly cast in their roles, so obviously them being able to slip right back in fits perfectly.
Yeah, there's a much more complex story to this one this time around.
It definitely feels like the first one felt a lot like, basically, let's do Toy Story with emotions, and now this one is, okay, now we have a bit more of a complex issue to play with, so let's make the plot a bit more complex while we're at it.
I mean, part of this had a very similar plot to Toy Story, because you had a new kind of thing coming in and kind of muscling the old thing out.
Yeah, but that was also kind of what was going on in the first one with joy and sadness as arcs. And then there's the fact that the new emotions are pretty good when it comes down to it. Like Maya Hawke in particular gets the lion's share of the screen time, which allows her to kind of be the one who needs the most character development throughout there.
And obviously it's because anxiety is set up in a way to be sort of the antagonist of the movie, but it's a much more richer thing than just a straight antagonist.
And I think that that's one of the things that makes this movie at least have some kind of heart to it. The fact that, yes, while the first Inside Out had more obstacles than anything you would call a straight villain, this time around we have something close to an antagonist.
But it's not. But you wouldn't even really call anxiety an antagonist watching the movie. She is very much doing things that an antagonist would do, but she has her reasonings behind it.
Like with the first movie, I'd call her more an obstacle than an actual antagonist. Like this isn't like the first movie where it almost felt like there was some invisible villain guiding every terrible thing that happens to joy and sadness throughout the movie that slows them down. And everything is just, anxiety very much controls the show. It has very noble motivations, but it's still anxiety, and if you've ever felt excessive anxiety, you kind of understand where it's coming from.
It is it makes for a very interesting third act where you are suddenly very much catching some secondhand anxiety from watching that.
And of course, the first movie was a meditation on forced happiness. This one is more a meditation on finding yourself, deciding, taking every experience you've got and figuring out who you really are. And I think that's really kind of the way to go about this, because when do you find out who you truly are more than when you're in high school? Granted, usually it's in the later years of high school, but whatever, this is what they're playing with.
And it's just an interesting way of telling this story. We are focusing a lot on the Riley end this time around.
Yeah, Riley was the setting of the first movie, but here it feels like her entire existence in this movie is more of a complex B story than it was the first time around.
Yeah, not to call her an empty character the first time around, because she was a character the first time around, but
literally the fact that the characters existed gave her a character.
Yeah, but this time around, it is we are spending a lot more time with Riley, and that's because Riley has a lot of interesting stuff going on with herself. It's not just she moved into a new town, she doesn't have friends yet or anything, and she's just kind of feeling like an outcast and having a very hard time with her emotions. This time around, she's going through stuff. She's realizing that she needs to make new friends in order to survive going forward.
She's trying to figure out how to keep relationships with her old friends. She's dealing with a lot of the stuff that people go through at that age. So her arc being the plot of the movie, of going through this anxiety-filled haze of, I need to be good enough to achieve my goals when I'm only 13 is just kind of one of those relatable things.
Yeah.
And some would argue it's still as relatable when you're 31.
And yeah, it hits you in the anxiety a bit. Even if you are so far disconnected from that time period, you can still remember what it was like to feel that, and any little spurts you feel even today as an adult.
And then let's talk about the fact that the other emotions actually get to play a bigger role than just kind of holding down the fort while joy and sadness go on the adventure. This time around, the other emotions kind of get to go on the adventure with joy as they send sadness back to headquarters pretty early.
Yeah, so there's a lot more of fear, anger, and disgust. And we see a lot more layers of these characters.
Like, they allow anger a bit of more than just being the angry guy. They allow fear to have more emotions. They allow disgust to be more than just disgust. They are allowing these characters to actually be more than just one-note jokes. And once again, Bill Hader and Mindy Kaling are kind of justified in deciding, well, if we're going to be in the movie more, maybe you should pay us what you're paying Amy, but that's neither here nor there.
Ultimately, this is a good movie. It's not a great movie. I'm interested to see if they can continue forward with this because, like we said in the beginning, this is very much a franchise that has a lot of potential to it, and in making these movies, they have a lot of ideas that they couldn't use in this movie that they could move ahead to another movie.
Like, there's a lot you can play with in this world. People's worlds change all the time, and creating a world that changes with them. We've all wanted to see, pretty much since the first movie, what happens next. What's going to happen to Riley through high school, through college, through her adult years, all that stuff. And if this were to continue as an even bigger franchise, then I hope we get to see more of that.
Yeah.
For right now, we've got this, and we've got a spin-off coming to Disney Plus next year.
Yeah.
But for right now, we've got this. It's a good movie. I recommend it as a follow-up to Inside Out. I just don't think that it's as good as the first Inside Out. Maybe in rewatches we'll find it better. Maybe.
But in the end, it's really hard to compare to one of the best movies Pixar's ever made. So just go in with a little bit less expectations than that.
Yeah. But that's it for now. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to this channel, leave in the comments what you may or may not have thought of Inside Out too, and don't forget to tune in next time when Let's fucking go.
Let's fucking go.
Bye.